Okay, welcome back. This is, well, not welcome back, we're just in the next video. This is English 373, week 3, part 2. Interestingly, and we'll talk more about this when we get there, but Romeo and Juliet was generally considered to be a very bad story. People love Romeo and Juliet nowadays, but Romeo and Juliet was considered to actually be pretty shitty. People didn't like that play because it's not really a tragedy. Romeo and Juliet, it's tricky. Romeo and Juliet die because they're so in love and they're in such a hurry. That's tragedy. But a lot of what happens to Romeo and Juliet just seems like bad fucking luck. Like Romeo doesn't get the message that she's faking her own death. That's not really tragedy. That's just bad luck. Bad luck is not tragedy. Tragedy's got to come from in here and who you are as a person. Um, okay. Anyway, I think I'm now done with that, and I'm ready to move on. But I thought that was a really important thing to grasp about what's happening. That's why we spend so much time on character psychology, because it's what tragedy is. I'm sure you guys have noticed this in your own lives, that people you know, maybe you yourself, make the same mistakes over and over and over again. You just can't stop. You can't stop who you are. You have things that you want, and people explain to you that those are bad things that you should not want, and you're like, no, I'm gonna do it anyway. And you ever see people who like date somebody that's bad for them, and then they break up and they date someone else, and that second person is just like the first person. They can't help it. They just do the same thing over and over again. That's tragedy. It's who they are. It comes from in here. Um, People pick terrible people to be with sometimes. Okay. Sorry, I can never tell how hot a hot beverage is going to be, and so I'm like very like, "Ooh, am I going to get burned?" And I'm like, "No, it's fine. It's delicious." Okay, so let's get back into Macbeth. Macbeth is not a funny play. It is a very depressing play. Um, there is one bit in the play that is comic relief. Although in the Patrick Stewart movie, somehow they take that comic relief and they make it very unpleasant, and I actually kind of hate that scene. Um, But there is a scene that's not in the movie that we saw. It's actually usually cut out of movies, partly because movies are shorter than Shakespeare plays, and they tend to always look for things to cut. And the Porter scene is one of those things that you can cut, and it doesn't affect the plot if you cut it out. But I think it's really important. But it was not in the movie. Basically, it's the Porter is like a security guard in front of the castle. He's like the guards at BMCC, and his job is to kind of open the door and let people in. This is the night of the party. So this is after Macbeth has murdered Duncan, the king. The porter, this guy Macduff, shows up. That's Macbeth's big antagonist. They're going to fight in the end of the play. Um, Macduff shows up to wake the king up like really early in the morning. I don't know why. Are they going hunting or something? They got to get up really early in the morning. I don't know what it is. Anyway, everybody's sleeping, and Macduff shows up at the. And the thing is, in the movie, it takes place like in a tent area, but in the play, it's like a castle. And so if you've seen these castles, it's like there's a very big wooden door with like maybe it's got a portcullis, which is one of those iron gates that comes. So you got to pull off the chain, and you got to do this. It's not. You can't just like open the door like guy in. It's like a giant super door for holding off an army. And they will be using that later to hold off an army. Actually, no, I guess they won't. That's a different castle. Anyway, the point is that there's a guy whose job it is to open up this giant fuck off door and let people in, and that guy is the porter. Now, remember, they were having a party that night to celebrate them winning the battle. That was the battle at the opening of the play. Macbeth's promotion is also being celebrated because Macbeth got promoted from to Thane of Cawdor. He used to be Thane of Glamis. And the porter has been partying, and as a result, when Macduff comes to knock on the gate to be led into the castle, first of all, it takes a long time in any circumstance to open a door that big, which may have a bunch of iron pieces to it, and it's a very heavy, big wooden door. But the porter, and this is up to an actor to decide how he wants to play it, the porter is either very drunk from the party or very hungover from the party. Up to the how do we? Every actor has to decide for themselves whether if you've been cast in Macbeth as the porter, you're going to have to decide: are you going to do this drunk or are you going to do this hungover? In Patrick Stewart's Macbeth, they do a thing where he's basically like Satan. I don't really understand that. It's gross. I don't like what they do there. Nothing problems with that movie. I do like the evil nurse witches. They're kind of cool. Anyway, so the porter is drunk and or hungover. I'm gonna go with drunk because the clip I'm gonna show you, he seems clearly drunk. The porter's drunk and is opening the gate, and as he opens the gate, he talks to himself and makes jokes. There's not a lot, and because Macbeth doesn't have jokes in it, like a famous poet named Coleridge, who wrote Kubla Khan and the Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Christabel. He was a poet from like the 1800s. He was friends with Wordsworth if he took English 250 with me. They were like best buds. Coleridge was actually like, Shakespeare didn't write this scene. Somebody else wrote this scene. It doesn't match the rest of the play. It does. It does match the rest of the play. It is funny, but I'm going to show you how it fits into the play as a whole. So let's take a look at it. So I am on the bottom of page 7. And so someone's knocking at the door, and the porter says, "Here's a knocking indeed. If a man were to have porter of Hailgate." I'm sorry, David. The clip that I've got is David Tennant from Doctor Who doing the accent. He's also from Harry Potter, and I can't read it without hearing his voice. It's one of the weird things about what I did with this project is I watched like 100 Shakespeare movies, and certain actors deliver lines in a certain way that get stuck in my head. So now when I read the play, I'll hit like one line, and I'll hear it in my head like one actor, and then I'll hit another line, and I'll hear it in my head like another actor from a totally different movie of this play, and then I'll hit another line, and it just like certain deliveries like really get stuck from watching way too many Shakespeare movies. So the porter, he hears the knocking, and he wakes up. He says, "Here's a knocking indeed. If a man were to porter of Hellgate, he should have old turning the key." So he starts imagining, what if he were not the security guard opening the door for the castle, but instead the security guard opening the door for hell. It's a funny joke. It's funnier than he knows, because of course he is opening the door to a kind of hell, which is that Macduff is going to discover the king's dead body because he has been killed during the night. But right now, no one knows that except Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So he imagines, and he says, "Man, if instead of having this job, I was opening the gates of hell, I would always be busy." And the joke is, he'd always be busy because the world is terrible and so many people are going to hell. And he's just like, "Oh boy, like I don't even like getting up to open the door for one guy. If I was the porter for hell, I'd be opening the door for 100 people." Knock, knock, knock. Who's there in the name of Beelzebub? Beelzebub is like a devil. By the way, some people have said knock, knock, who's there? I've heard people claim that's the origin of the knock, knock joke, because he's saying knock, knock, who's there, and he's telling jokes. It's not quite the same as like ordinary as like the knock, knock jokes that kids are familiar with, but I don't know. Some people have said that. I don't really know what to make of that. Then he starts imagining, because it takes him so long to open the door that he has time. And again, it takes him a long time because it's hard, but also he's real drunk. He starts imagining the different kind of people he would let into hell if he was in charge of hell. He's imagining all the sinners he would have to open the door for and how exhausting that would be. So for starters, he says, and there's 3 sinners he mentions. He says, "Who's there in the name of Beelzebub, in the name of the devil?" Because he's imagining if he was opening the gates of hell, there'd be devils there. "Here's a farmer that hanged himself on the expectation of plenty. Come in time, have napkins enough about you here, you'll sweat for it." So the first person he imagines is a farmer who hanged himself on the expectation of plenty, meaning a farmer who expected to make a lot of money from his crops, who went into debt expecting to pay it back later, and then all the crops died, and he committed suicide. And in these days, and at this time in history, the church imagined that people who committed suicide went to hell. They saw suicide as a sin. We tend to see suicide as a mental illness, and we don't want to send people to hell for mental illnesses, and so we don't tend to talk like that. In fact, I met a woman who researches suicide. In the scientific community, they do not say committed suicide. They say completed suicide. And I was like, why are they talking like this? And it took me a minute because I went to a talk for, it's not even worth explaining. I was trying to get a promotion, so I was going to other professors' talks at BMCZ. I got my promotion. It's fine. And I was trying to be friendly and shit. So, but the woman said completed suicide. And I was like, don't you mean committed suicide? But I thought about it, and the word committed is used for crimes. He committed bank robbery. He committed assault. He committed rape. So when just saying committed suicide, it's like when you say this person committed suicide, you're saying this person did a crime. And we tend not to see suicide as a crime. It's more of a mental illness. And anyway, they saw it as a crime against God that would get you sent to hell. Okay, so that's the first of the 3 sinners that's headed into the hell gate. And I'll pick it up in the next video.